technically wrapping up our controversial February series. Although we're going to do an epilogue next week and talk about dating. So, that's fun. But we've talked about racism, we've talked about abortion, we've talked about LGBTQ plus stuff in the Bible, and today, this is the one that I've been waiting for. God, guns, and glory. And so this one, I think, out of all of the things that we've talked about, this is the most controversial from a Christian perspective. Because there are different views on whether or not a Christian should ever use lethal force. And so what we're going to do is we're going to present some different views. This is Isaac Nielsen. Everybody say hi. I've known Isaac since before he was aware of himself. I've known his family longer than he has. Is not better than he has, but certainly longer. And so Isaac is going to be taking the position of pro self-defense, guns, and then I'm going to be taking the position of Christian nonviolence. And what we're going to do is we're going to present the different views. Isaac's going to start. I suppose we should have talked about that to let you know that that's what's going to happen. But that's the order of the slides. So what are we going to do? So Isaac's going to start and give that position, and then I'm going to give my position of Christian nonviolence. And the whole goal of this is just to really get us thinking about how to love God and glorify Him in a very complicated world. We're not trying to convince you of either of the positions, okay? We're just presenting them. If you happen to get convinced by the end of this of a certain position, whatever, but that's not our goal. One last thing. Our 10 Commandments of Youth Group, there are no phones during larger group message. And I don't think you'll want to be on them anyway, because this is going to be a pretty fun conversation. And so we're going to give ourselves about 10 to 15 minutes for each of the positions. And then what we're probably just going to do is open it up for questions for either of the positions. Maybe we'll ask each other some questions, but we want this to be a discussion. So, any questions before we start? All right, shoot. That's funny. All right, so in defense of self-defense, right? So, Isaac, take it away, my friend.
Okay, so while the principles of loving one's enemies, as taught by Christ, is indeed a cornerstone of many ethical systems, the assertion that killing another human being can never be an act of love towards an individual being killed warrants careful examination. While it is undeniable that love should ideally guide our actions and interactions and behaviors, there are situations where the complexities of moral decision-making challenges us to consider the possibility of certain acts, also possibly killing someone. Under specific circumstances, it may be motivated by a genuine concern or well-being for oneself or another. So, one of Brax's arguments is killing a human being can never be an act of love, or towards a human being that is being killed. Jesus commands us to love our enemies, therefore we cannot kill our enemies. While it's true that Jesus commands us to love our enemies, there are situations where killing another human being may be viewed as an act of love, particularly when it is done to protect innocent lives and uphold justice. Firstly, in cases of self-defense or defense of others, killing may be a necessary and justified response to an imminent threat or violence. In such situations, the intention behind actions is not one of hatred or malice, but rather the desire to prevent harm and preserve life. For instance, if someone is threatening lives of an innocent individual, such as cases of armed robbery, terrorism, taking decisive action to neutralize the threat may be seen as an act of love towards those who are at risk. Furthermore, in instances where individuals perpetrate heinous crimes or atrocities such as genocide or mass murder, there may be an argument for the use of lethal force to uphold justice and prevent further harm. While it's true that forgiveness and redemption are important principles, there are limits to their applications in the face of unpertinent evil. In such extreme cases, allowing perpetrators to continue their actions unchecked would be a betrayal of love towards the victims and future potential victims. Moreover, some theological interpretations sacrificing one's life for the greater good or for the righteous cause can be contributed to an ultimate act of love. For example, soldiers who lay down their lives in the defense of our countries, or martyrs who endure persecution for their faith are often regarded as examples of sacrificial love. While killing another human being is typically antithetical to the principles of love and compassion, there are exponential circumstances where it may be perceived as necessary and justified, and a justified response to protect innocent lives, uphold justice, or makes a sacrificial contribution to the greater good. Thus, the assertion that killing never can be an act of love should be announced to acknowledge the complexities of moral decision making in the situation of extreme duress or moral dilemma. So that's kind of my opening.
Okay. So to sum up, what I'm hearing you, tell me if I'm hearing you right.
Yep.
That if your life is threatened, or if innocent lives are being threatened, then it is morally justified that a Christian would kill the person who is threatening the lives of innocent people. And then there's also the sacrificing your life and for the sake of one's country, and then also you get into capital punishment a little bit there as well. Of if someone, let's say someone's a serial killer and has just been killing like crazy, and then it's like, well, what do we do to put a stop to that? For one, you could kill him, if he's threatening lives immediately. But then you get to a court, then you could actually say, yes, it's fine to give him the death penalty because that's justice to the families. Right? Have I summed up what you're saying?
Relatively, yeah.
Relatively, okay.
And we can get into it in a little bit.
Yeah, we can discuss it more. So I'm going to give you my position here on Christian nonviolence. Again, no phones during large group time, and let's get into it. So Jesus commands us towards enemy love. This is Jesus in Matthew 5:43-48. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So here's Jesus' logic. This is premise one. Jesus commands us to love all people, including our enemies. Can we agree on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Premise two. It's never an act of love toward the person you are killing to kill them. And that's going to be, I think, where the point of conversation really is. Of, okay, is that true? I think that's pretty obvious from our experience. I don't think if I killed you, you would call that an act of love. Therefore, we cannot kill our enemies without breaking the command of Jesus to love them. That's the logic. I think that's pretty straightforward. So how about we'll take a look at how people have argued, because you can't disagree with this conclusion unless you somehow manage to disagree and prove either of these premises wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So let's take a look at it's never an act of love toward the person you are killing to kill them. Let's just for the sake of argument say it is somehow. Let's say that Isaac manages to convince us that killing another human being is an act of love to kill that human being. We're not talking about how loving it would be. Let's say Hannah wants to kill us all, right? And then Isaac takes out his gun and guns her down. That might be an act of love to protect everybody else, but is it an act of love to Hannah? And I think the answer would be no. If we try to redefine love and say, yeah, somehow, let's just say, Hannah's really, obviously, if she's going to do this, she must be living in misery. And so this is just a mercy killing to put her down, Like, let's say it's that. Okay. If we redefine love to mean something, how do you understand what love is? How do you get that definition in the first place? Where does it come from? The dictionary. Great. Awesome. How do you understand what love is? Huh? It's a feeling. It's from experience, right? There are people who love you. Hopefully that's your family, and I understand that sometimes that's not always the case, but you find community somewhere and they love you. That's where you get your definition of love. Yes? So then if we redefine love to mean something that is completely outside of our experience, how will we ever understand what love is again? And remember, this isn't just an issue about people. In our definition of love, God says that He is love, right? So if we redefine love to mean something that is completely foreign to our experience, I don't know if we will have a good understanding of who God is anymore. On top of that, let's look back at the horizontal plane of us dealing with each other. If we can say that Hannah going psycho and, trying to kill us all, and Isaac killing Hannah is actually an act of love for Hannah, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Yeah. How about this argument? My aging grandpa is suffering horribly. He wants to go to a state that he can have physician-assisted suicide. He's in horrible suffering. He's going to die anyway. Why can't we just let him die? Why can't we have physician-assisted suicide? Why can't we have euthanasia for people who want it? Doesn't that sound more loving than just gunning Hannah down because she's psycho? Wouldn't it sound more loving even if someone said, if I were to have this child that was unplanned, they're going to go through a life of suffering and evil. They have a genetic disease. This is going to be a horrible existence for them. I want them to experience only love and comfort from me in the womb. So we'll just end the pregnancy. To me, both of those arguments for euthanasia and abortion sound more loving than gunning Hannah down. So if we're going to say that killing another human being can be an act of love toward that human being, then I think abortion and euthanasia are back on the table. And if you're not comfortable with that, then I think there's a problem. Then you could say, premise one, well, when Jesus tells us to love all people, including our enemies, well, maybe there are some people who are not included within that love. Jesus was asked, and who is my neighbor? In Luke 10, 25 through 37, by a Pharisee. And you know the story of the Good Samaritan? That's how Jesus answers the question. Samaritans were the enemies of the Jewish people, one of them. And so Jesus answers the question, who is my neighbor, by defining it as your neighbor is your enemy. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, who would be included?
Your neighbors.
Your neighbors and seems like everybody. If neighbor is enemy, then enemy must be anyone who would mistreat you. And in the context of Matthew 5, where we get the command to love your enemy, he also commands if anyone would force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Go the extra mile. That's referring to Roman practice of a Roman could make a citizen carry their load for 1 mile. The Romans were the evil overlords over the Jewish people. So Jesus is saying you can't kill anyone, I think. And then the question is, well, what about the Old Testament, right? There's a lot of killing in the Old Testament. So what about that? Yes? Isn't that a question that we have? What about the Old Testament? Okay, I'm glad some of us have that question. First of all, Jesus is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. He says that in his Sermon on the Mount. So we can't use the Old Testament against Jesus. We can't do like Old Testament, New Testament jujitsu, okay? We can't use the Old Testament against Jesus when he's the fulfillment of it and interprets it for us today. The people of God were to be also a light to the nations in the Old Testament, so it's not ideal that they would be killing people. Their whole purpose is that their way of life, their wisdom, their following the way of the Lord would gather the nations into Israel so that they could know and experience the God of the Israelites as well. So it's not ideal even for them that they would be killing people. They did kill a lot of people, though, in wars. The Old Testament is the Old Covenant, though, isn't it? So there were commands to make war in the Old Testament, but no such command exists for the Christian in the New Testament, right? We talked about this a couple weeks ago, is that if an Old Testament command is repeated in the New Testament, then it's still something for you to follow. Do we find those commandments in the New Testament that we should make war in the New Testament from the Old Testament to New? Do we find those? We do, but differently. Okay, this is the way that the New Testament talks about how we are to make war and to fight. Paul says in Ephesians 6, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Our fight is not against people. Our fight is against the spiritual forces in this world. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. Swords, guns, nukes, none of it. On the contrary, our weapons have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So then the question would become, okay, if the Bible is teaching us that we can't fight, and we can't make war, and we can't kill, if a situation comes up, like Isaac was talking about, if someone is attacking you, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to just die? Good question. Glad you think so, Kyle. Jesus tells us to just die. This is what he says in the Gospels. This is just one example of him saying this. Then he called the crowds to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross, their instrument of torture and execution, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. And at this point, you can hear some people saying, what about the lives of my family? Who will take care of them? What about my hopes and my dreams? What about all the good that I could do in this world? Jesus grants that, and he says, okay, what if someone were to gain the whole world, actually, if they were to just stay alive? What if they were going to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? What can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words, and who is he? He's the crucified Messiah, and his words are to follow me into death. If anyone's ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Now you might say, okay, yes, Jesus died on the cross. He didn't fight back. He didn't kill anyone. He just died. He kind of has to do that in order for us to be redeemed, right? So he dies as Redeemer. John says in 1 John chapter 2, verse 2, he is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for ours, but also for the sins of the whole world, right? That's why he died. But Jesus didn't just die to be Redeemer, to be the atoning sacrifice for the sins of the whole world. Right after John is finished saying what Jesus has done as the atoning sacrifice, he then says, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but doesn't do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. And this is how we know we are in Jesus. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. How did Jesus live? He died. Self-sacrificially, not killing his enemies, but letting his enemies kill him. Okay, the disciples take Jesus' example to heart. Stephen is the first recorded martyr. He dies without a fight, right? This is in the book of Acts, chapter 7 at the end. He just dies. He doesn't fight back, and in fact, he imitates Jesus by praying that God would forgive those who are currently murdering him. Paul is one of the people who's involved in the murder of Stephen. Paul is what I would call a lowlife. There's kind of a part of this argument that's like, okay, what if it's my life on the line, or this junkie who has done all these horrible things and is going to do more illegal, horrible things. If he kills me, he's just going to move on to somebody else. That's a low life, right? So it might as well be that I put him out of his misery rather than me being killed. Paul is one of those kinds of people. He holds the coats of the people who are murdering Stephen. There's a certain kind of low life that you have to be in order to not get your hands dirty, but approve of someone's murder while you watch. And it's Paul that God uses to be the bearer of the gospel to the Gentiles. You know why you're a Christian here today? If you're a Christian, it's largely because of Paul's influence. And Paul is one of those who also does not fight back, though he used to be violent towards the church. He renounces those ways of violence, and he eventually is martyred for his faith. All of the disciples that followed Jesus were also martyred, died without a fight. The only one who lived to old age that we know of is John, and he was at one point boiled alive in oil. And these guys don't fight back. The early church going forward after the New Testament era is unanimous in their refusal to take up the sword. These guys can't even always agree on the nature of the Trinity. And yet they're all in agreement that you can't take up the sword. You can't use violence. Tertullian says Christ, in disarming Peter, disarmed every soldier. I'm not going to read all of these. Justin Martyr, you can tell he gets martyred later because it's in his name. We ourselves were well conversant with war. We knew it. We knew murder and everything evil. But all of us throughout the world, the whole wide earth, have traded in our weapons of war. We've exchanged our swords for plowshares, our spears for farm tools. Now we cultivate the fear of God, justice, kindness, faith, and the expectation of the future given us through the crucified one. Some more. Irenaeus says Christians have changed their swords and their lances into instruments of peace, and they know not how to fight. Martin of Tours, I have served as a soldier. Allow me now to become a soldier to God. Let the man who is to serve you receive donations. I am a soldier of Christ. It's not permissible for me to fight. Athanasius of Alexandria, Christians, instead of arming themselves with swords, extend their hands in prayer. Hippolytus goes so far as to say, a person who has accepted the power of killing, or a soldier, may never be received into the church at all. St. Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, says Christians are not allowed to kill, but they must be ready to put to death themselves. It's not permitted, the guiltless, the Christian, to put even the guilty to death. Okay, you could take all of this argument, everything that the early church said, everything that the New Testament says, and say, yes, but the world is complicated. Sometimes wars are a necessary evil. The question then becomes, should a Christian participate in war? Should a Christian ever kill? Okay, if you decide, I am going to allow myself to kill, you should know who you're killing, right? Either you are killing someone who is a Christian or isn't a Christian. There's only two types of people, right? If you're killing someone who does not know Jesus, that might seem like the better option. You're sending them to God's judgment and are not being patient. God said about him in 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. If you kill someone who is not a Christian, you are robbing them of the chance to repent and to know Jesus. So then your other option is to kill Christians, because at least they get to go to heaven when they die. If you kill someone who's a Christian, you are shedding the blood of the bride of Christ. Jesus does not want that kind of war and infighting within his church. He prays in John 17. This is the prayer that he is praying before he goes and is betrayed in the Garden of Gethsemane and goes to his death. This is a very important prayer. He prays, I and them and you and me. He's praying to his Father and says that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them even as you loved me. If we kill other Christians, we are telling the world that they should not know Jesus, because we are no different from them. The way Jesus says that that the world will know that he has been sent as Redeemer is through our unity, not through our fighting, not through killing each other. And besides, if you go to war, if you kill in war, who are you serving? Jesus or the kings of this world? The kings of this world demand your blood and the blood of the enemy in order to keep what they call peace. Jesus, as our king, offers his own blood to bring enemies together, to redeem us in love. These kings do not care about you. They don't. 100%. They want your blood as a sacrifice and the blood of the enemy in order to keep their peace. Jesus offers himself as sacrifice to make new peace. At the end of the day, you could say, yeah, but what about my life? The cross is the way that the world is redeemed, even if it costs us our lives. Missionaries know this. Missionaries live this. We're to take up our crosses to redeem the world too, not take up weapons of war. So, that's the Christian nonviolence position. We've got some time. Any questions for me or for Isaac? Kyle.
What about defending the lives of those who haven't been redeemed yet? Sort of the classic train spotting problem. We got people here and people there.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Any? Can you think of an answer to that?
I mean, to me, it seems the most righteous thing to do is to protect. If there are more unredeemed souls to protect than there are coming to kill, then it seems like you go with bigger numbers. You redeem as many as you can.
So that is a utilitarian ethic. You guys know what utilitarianism is? So utilitarianism, for those who don't know, is doing an act in order to bring the most amount of good to the most amount of people. So there's some problems with that.
So isn't that what the Pharisees did with Jesus? They said,
Yeah, they did. They said, actually, that's a good point. In the Gospel of John, I think it's John 12, that they reasoned that it was better that one man should die for the people than the whole nation should perish. The problem with utilitarianism is that we don't know what act is going to bring about the most amount of good. You know this experientially, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is why there's a thing called teenage angst. You don't know what is going to bring about the most amount of good. So we agonize over every decision that we make. Right? We don't know what is going to bring about the most amount of good. Should I wear this or not wear this?
We can take an educated guess.
You can take an educated guess, but the thing is, what we're dealing with in the commands of Christ is Jesus' upside-down kingdom. Everything that we know about the way that the world works is not the way that his kingdom works. So it could be that, let's say, just to get the trolley example, there's one unbeliever who wants to kill 5 people. Should you kill the person who's trying to kill the other 5? I think Jesus' commands are categorical, which means you never do this, ever, under any circumstance. And when we follow Jesus, God's will is going to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Somehow, God is going to redeem, regardless of atrocity. It's just that we can't sin and justify it by saying that we wanted a good result. Romans 3. Paul says that. Why not sin that good may result? And he says that's a dumb argument. No, he's talking about other things in that passage, but I think the principle applies. Does that answer the question? Okay. We'll wait for Ethan.
I have a whole position.
He's got some arguments loaded up in the barrels. Yes, Jordan.
So my issue is that, like, what if you're not actually shooting to kill? Like, say that you have the 1 versus the 5, and the 1 is trying to kill the 5. But
Yeah.
if you shoot the 1, but not in a place that it would kill that person,
Yeah.
you know that.
Yeah.
But it will stop them from doing the action, so therefore all of them are still going to be alive, and all of them can still be saved.
Yeah.
Can I jump off of that just as a point of clarification for you?
Sure.
So shooting a gun isn't a guaranteed kill.
Yeah.
It is a very real reality, though.
Yeah.
Is it your position that we should not take potential lethal action when it comes to stopping something horrific?
I think-
so. A taser has a very real reality of killing.
Right.
Should we not do anything that has a real reality of killing, because that action would then be unloving?
I think
Because would it be unloving to shoot somebody but not kill them? But it would be unloving to shoot them and kill them.
there's degrees in intent. Okay, so to answer what you're saying, there's a real possibility that if I drive my kids in my car that they're going to die, but that's not the intent of me driving, right? So to answer your question, Jordan, for one, you have to be a crazy good shot in order to, hit them in places that are non-lethal. Right?
You're sort of
You're aiming for the triangle, right? The
80%
body
of
mass. Yes.
Most of the time, if you hit them besides from the heart or the head,
Right.
they'll last a long time.
Yeah.
You're not gonna. It's not instant.
Yeah. I am not of the position that would say that you cannot use force to stop someone, because I see a use of force as something that can actually be love rather than killing them. So a typical example is like, okay, so someone breaks in your house and wants to, slaughter your family. Are you just going to stand there? And the answer is no, because I love my family and I love this person who's breaking into my house, I want to stop them. If I kill them, there's no chance of redemption for them, right? They're just dead. If I physically restrain them, I have stopped them from committing an act that is going to ruin their lives because they're going to go into the prison system. So if I can stop them through force, I want to do that. I would probably want to start with, there's plenty of stories of missionaries who, people break into their house because they're Christians, want to slaughter them, and the missionaries will say, okay, yep, you can kill us, but before you do that, can we make you a meal? Can we have a meal together? And it's this kindness that brings these people to repentance. We see that from Romans 2:4. So there are other ways of force, and we see that there's prayer, there's kindness, there's even then using your body physically. I think there's precedent for that with Jesus. I lay down my life for the sheep. So does that answer the question of I would think if you happen to have a gun and you're a good shot, sure, shoot the gun out of their hands. But that's pretty unlikely. But I would say that use of force that will stop someone from committing a heinous act would be permissible for a Christian.
So then in your argument, why does that not include a gun? Because let's say I run to you, or I run towards you because you're a bad guy,
Yeah.
and I tackle you. I outweigh you by 60, 70 pounds.
Yeah.
And as soon as you hit the ground, you hit your head or your spinal cord just right and it kills you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can define your intent based off of action. I think if you're going to do any action to stop someone, you have to be prepared for the consequences. And if that action includes a gun, I think that is just as justifiable as using my body to stop whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think that I can stop someone physically without accepting that I'm trying to kill them. I'm not trying to kill them. I'm trying to stop them.
I'm saying you have to.
Yeah,
the
if they
responsibility
accidentally
is-
die, that's not that wasn't my intent though. With a gun, it's like this thing kills people. That's kind of that's what it's for.
Brax, at what percent?
Cameron has a question though.
Yeah, I'm sure you would like that.
No, she had a question long before
Exactly
the.
what he was saying.
She's had her hand up for a while.
So you were saying that if you restrain someone,
Yeah,
you're like giving them a chance because you're not killing them.
yeah,
But what happens if you restrain someone who's like a serial killer and
Yeah.
they're gonna get the death penalty? Like they're gonna die either way. Like,
Well,
is that what you're saying?
yeah. The church hasn't been given the sword though. The state has.
But you're saying the death penalty.
Yeah. So if I take out my 44 and I blow the guy's head off and he's a serial killer, it's like, well, that was what was basically going to happen to him anyway. He's just going to get, lethal injection. If I physically restrain him and he gets arrested and then I find out later, oh, he was a serial killer. He killed all these people. He's going to get lethal injection. I've bought him time. I bought him time. There's a chance for him to be redeemed. Jeffrey Dahmer, right? This guy ate people and then came to Christ later in his life. Yeah. That shouldn't be shocking to us. That's the power of God's redemption. So if someone had shot Jeffrey Dahmer's head off, there's no redemption for him. He just dies. But he was arrested, he had time, he was redeemed. So that's one way of acting with love. But the other part is that the church has not been granted the use of the sword. The state has. We see this in Romans 13. The state has been granted authority by God to execute justice. But right before that, we have Romans 12 that is saying that we do not repay evil for evil. So there's this establishment of this is how the church behaves and this is how the state is going to behave. But they don't behave the same way. Does that make sense? Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, in your estimation, a gun kills people.
That's what it's for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tackling somebody doesn't.
That's not what it's for.
Sure.
Right.
At what percentage point of the likelihood of your action killing them is it okay?
I don't think there are percentage points.
But if you use a gun, if I use a gun in self-defense,
Mm-hmm.
in my argument, not my self-defense, but the defense of others.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to stop them, not kill them. That is the intent of a gun, is to stop them. If it kills them, that is something that happens when you use potential lethal force. That happens when you use a taser, use a baseball bat, cause blunt force trauma to even anywhere besides the head.
Yeah.
I think you're trying to draw a hard and fast line that can't.
This is no longer a question. Malia,
What?
you had a question.
Oh, well, I was just saying, this whole thing is reminding me of last Sunday, when we were talking about, how, you're driving a car, you see something, it looks like a person, but you don't know.
Yes, yep,
you just run
yeah.
over it, but I don't know. It just reminded me of that.
Okay, so no question.
No.
Thanks, Sydney.
But so you know how you're saying how guns kill people?
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think it's guns that kill people. I
People
think
kill
it's
people.
People kill people.
But there are things that are designed. So a wrench, what's that for? For fixing things. So a person, the wrench doesn't fix things, I fix things. Grant that. But there are tools that I use for certain things, right? So a wrench is for fixing things. You can use it to kill someone, but it's for fixing things. What is the purpose of a gun?
To defend yourself, not necessarily the intent of killing someone.
Okay.
Why did we invent guns?
So that more lives, even while
To kill people. Yeah, that the whole point. I can't say that a tank is just it's just for getting around. No, that's to kill people. There are weapons of war. We've created those. Swords are the category in the New Testament for this. And that's why in Old Testament and New Testament, that's the vision of God's peace in this world is that swords would be beaten into plowshares, that they would be for different purposes rather than guns. And guns, that's what they're made for, is for war. Eddie and then Danica.
The purpose of a gun is to shoot a bullet.
Yeah, but ultimately it's... So you could say a rifle, that could be a hunting rifle. It's to kill something, right? That's what you're using it for. And then a handgun, you don't use that to hunt.
Yeah, you do.
Well, if you're hunting deer with a 9mm, that's awesome, dude. You go for it. But people use hunting rifles for them. Handguns are for self-defense and for killing people. Danica.
Well, you can like use a hunting rifle to kill a
Sure.
person.
Yes.
So
Yep.
Do you think that like guns for like all guns are bad, or do you like what's your position on like hunting? Is it okay to kill animals?
I think it's fine to kill an animal. God's given us He's given us that part of what it means to be ruler of this world. We shouldn't bring anything to extinction, I think. I think, yeah. But people are different. They're made in the image of God and they're loved by Jesus and they're supposed to be redeemed rather than killed. Yeah, the problem with a gun, this is ultimately beside the point of it being like the gun. That's what its purpose is. A handgun, especially, it is lethal force. And the argument is that the cross is the way to redeem the world, not through killing. It could be a sword that you use, but the point is Jesus is our example. We follow him. And none of this, by the way, has refuted killing your enemy. Let's go back to this premise here, this argument. Okay, Jesus commands us to love all people, including our enemies, right? Is it ever an act of love to kill the person that you are killing? I could grant that it might be loving to protect other people, but is it an act of love to kill them? And if the answer is no, if this is yes and this is no, then the only way that you can kill another human being is by breaking the command of Jesus to love them.
Could it be considered an act of love if you're stopping them from committing an atrocity? Like, as in,
Towards the person?
yes, by killing them, you are stopping them from doing something terrible.
Did they do something terrible before that?
You have no
You
idea.
don't know.
Well, all sin and fall short of the glory of God, so if you kill them, then they're still sinful, and you don't know whether they're Christian or not. You don't judge someone's heart.
Yeah, that'd be an example of you not being patient and giving them a chance to redeem themselves.
Right. Nathan, you had something?
I do. So, kind of a two-part thing. Does it bring God glory? Abortions bring God glory? No. No. If I beat my sibling to a pulp, does that bring God glory? No. If I beat my bully to a pulp, does that bring God glory? If I beat the person attacking my family to a pulp, does that bring God glory?
No.
No. If I shoot them, does that bring God glory?
To protect people, yes.
But I'm beating them to a pulp to protect the family.
I wouldn't go to excessive force.
What's separating beating someone to a pulp and shooting them?
One is one action to stop the situation. One is continual. Like, if I keep shooting and they're down, that's excessive
Okay, I
and
slide
horrible.
my car into someone to protect my family.
Yeah,
That's one action.
yeah,
But it's a 2,000-pound bullet.
yeah.
Okay.
I
So
am
what you're saying would bring God glory to run over a human being. To
Here's
protect them. That's what you're saying.
did it bring God glory for David to kill Goliath?
Was that the Old Testament or the New Testament?
So are we taking away then all of the Old Testament? So then
Well, we're living
if we
under
go,
a new
no,
covenant.
just hold on. If we go from that perspective,
Uh-huh.
then we can do whatever we want. Then then
Not true.
Then the Ten Commandments don't apply.
Those things apply again in the New Testament. They're reiterated.
Not all of
Yeah,
them.
they're reiterated in the New Testament. Which ones aren't?
I don't know right off the top of my head. Conversation, but you can keep your conversation going. I just wanted to touch on it.
Yeah. What is your thought on the David versus Goliath one?
The thought-
Just because it's Old Testament, like Jesus fulfills the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Jesus it loves the Old Testament. Jesus loves that David killed Goliath.
Yes. Okay. Two parts of this. The Old Testament, we see love to two greatest commandments. Jesus talks about.
Hey guys,
Up to you.
I know. Could you guys? I really want to hear this. Can I hear it after we're done?
Yeah.
Fine.
Because I even have something to the point of what Goliath is in the first place, which changes the conversation. I'd love to be a part of that later.
Do you answer that?
Not right now. But are there more questions for me or for Isaac? Okay.
I do have an application question for you in the application of your thesis.
Okay. Do you guys mind if I take that? Okay. Go ahead.
It is unloving. In your thesis, it is unloving to kill someone. I am undecided. On this.
Okay.
Absolutely. If somebody comes in, active shooter situation at youth group,
Yeah.
Isaac pulls out his gun, about to commit, in your mind, a sin.
Yeah.
Should you stop Isaac?
That's to the point I talked about.
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. Sorry, the sun is in my eyes. It's a great question. Should I stop Isaac? I think
Who should you go after? Should you try and tackle the shooter or tackle Isaac?
if I stop the shooter, then Isaac doesn't have to kill him. So I'm going
But
after the
Isaac's
shooter.
finger is a little bit faster than you running.
So I've tried to convince Isaac not to kill people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that right now. Okay. So I in that moment, it's like I got to go after the guy who's trying to kill a lot of people, and hopefully, if I can stop him, Isaac won't have to shoot him.
Yeah. What if Isaac's right next to you?
If Isaac's right next to me, I'm praying.
Would you pull down my gun to save him and not possibly save the kids in youth group?
I would be praying. I don't know what I would
Isaac is
do.
me too.
If, however, Isaac was not a Christian, I would let him shoot him, because the state has been granted the sword, the church has not. So the state has thought it wise to give him a gun. Then I'm going to be trusting that the state has given him as an extension. He is a part of the entity of state.
Is it
And so then he
only
can-
for the police to kill?
I don't think it's right to kill anyone ever.
Should you call the police?
Yes, they've been given the power of the sword. Yes, that is their role, but the church does not have it.
It is okay to call upon the authority of
Yes.
the police and their guns to
Yes,
kill this person.
yes, because okay, this is about who we are. Is it okay for a Christian to kill someone? That's the question. And the answer that I have is no. It is not okay for a Christian to kill someone. If there is a person who is a member of the state, a police force or military, and they are not a Christian, I have no jurisdiction to say what they can and cannot do. Because God has given them the power of the sword and not the church. Christians cannot kill people. That's what I'm saying. There's lots of words all at once. Jordan has her hand up, though.
So are you then saying that Christians should not go into an area of law enforcement where they might be put in a position where they have to kill someone?
I think that a Christian should strongly consider that. Because,
And I want you to answer the question black and white.
yeah, I think that a Christian can be a police officer if they don't kill anyone. In the same way that I believe that a Christian could enter the military and not kill someone.
But if they're assisting in the act, say that Isaac enters the military,
Yep.
he's not actually on the front line.
Actually, his situation.
Also going in the lawn.
Right, yeah.
Where is that defining line between, okay, well, I'm setting up an act
Yeah.
that could kill
Yeah.
someone, but somebody else is doing the dirty work. Somebody else is the one who's actually pulling the trigger.
And that definitely, I think, is something that the individual Christian is going to have to wrestle with. Also, I would say that it is not necessarily sinful to be a part of a sinful system so long as you are acting righteously. We see this in Daniel's example, right?
You are helping them to set up said
Yeah.
You are helping them to set up that killing.
Yeah.
So if
Right.
I'm saying that if you are part of the operation to take down a certain leader or something like that, and you are helping to authorize other people to kill someone, but you are not doing it yourself,
Yeah.
you're still assisting in an act, which by state law would be, like, if, say that I help you murder someone,
Right.
I would still be.
Yeah, even if you didn't do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
How does that work? Our
I-
nation is not allowed to help the government do that because even if, like, you can enter.
Yeah, I would say that the best answer that I have is that it is possible to work within a system that is sinful without becoming sinful yourself by following the commandments of God. When it comes to military, I would be very cautious. It would be like, okay, what am I a part of? What would my conscience allow me to be a part of? How much responsibility am I willing to take for helping other people, kill other people? It's at this point, it would be a complicated moral question that it's like, I don't have a clean answer for. And I don't think that the Bible would either. Daniel is literally in the council for a pagan king and is able to follow the commandments of God and not himself become sinful, even though he's a part of a sinful system. And did he pass legislation, or was he a part of things that would allow people to sin? Maybe he was. I don't know. But he himself is held up as an example of someone who followed the commandments of God, even to the point of death, within a sinful system. I'm sorry I don't have a cleaner answer for you. Sydney?
Do you just like out of curiosity, do you personally believe that you're fighting for it, or is it just for arguing?
For the sake of this conversation, neither of us are giving the answer of whether or not we believe the positions that we're holding, because I don't want to sway anyone. Because if you like me or you like Isaac, like, well, I should listen to that. That should be mine because I like him better, But for the sake of this conversation, you don't know whether or not I believe this. So.
They're just both hypothetical situations.
Yep. Any other questions? Hannah?
So it's like kind of a long so
Okay, I want to hear this because Hannah was the psychopath in her hypotheticals. Yeah.
So, as a Christian, if you're in a situation like that where you're debating and you have a gun or have a weapon, where does God's forgiveness come into that?
I think that
Protection.
of if you kill someone,
Yes, out of protection.
I think that God's forgiveness is extended to murderers. We see that throughout the Bible. David was, and he was forgiven. Paul was, and he was forgiven. So I don't think that that's beyond forgiveness. But I do think that... Okay, so an example of this, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you guys heard of him, maybe? Okay, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian, and wow, you guys are done early. It was Paul preaching today. Got it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian as Hitler was rising to power. He comes to America during some of this and is wrestling with the Sermon on the Mount. And he has two brothers who have been in the military, the German military. And he's wrestling with Jesus' message of enemy love in the Sermon on the Mount. And he has a friend at the seminary in New York that is trying to convince him to take up Christian nonviolence. They go and see a movie, and the movie's name...
All Quiet on the Western Front.
All Quiet on the Western Front. And this, along with this friendship, convinces Dietrich Bonhoeffer to take up Christian nonviolence. He goes back to Germany because he believes that he can't celebrate the recovery of Germany after the horrible atrocities of Hitler are over unless he is a part of helping the underground church in Germany while Hitler is in power. During this time, Dietrich Bonhoeffer gets caught up in the underground movement that is going to try to assassinate Hitler in Operation Valkyrie. Okay? Dietrich Bonhoeffer agonizes over the question of whether or not he can have a hand in killing what has been known as the most evil person of the 20th century. This man agonizes over it and doesn't ever seem to come to a conclusion of whether or not his action is justifiable to have a hand in assassinating Hitler. And there's some debate about how much he was actually involved in the assassination itself, but we do know that he agonized over whether or not he should be involved in killing Hitler. So I think that Christians should, if they're going to kill someone, there should be agony over the decision. If you're going to allow for it, there should be agony over the decision to kill someone. I don't even think it should be the first choice. It should be redemption and kindness and physical force long before ever pulling the trigger. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'm going to officially call it right now, but I am totally fine to stick around and talk to you guys and take questions. Next week, we talk about dating.